how it all went south.
In the quiet town of Rome, Maine, strange thefts began happening in the mid-'80s, with everyday items like flashlights, stakes, and winter jackets disappearing from homes and camps, leaving no trace of a break-in. These mysterious burglaries, often occurring in spring and fall, became legendary, and locals dubbed the elusive thief the backpack burglar. The case went unsolved for nearly 3 decades, until in 2013, Christopher Knight, a man who had been living alone in the wilderness since 1986, was caught in the act. Knight, who had vanished at the age of 20, revealed that he had survived by foraging, scavenging, and stealing from local camps, including the Pine Tree Camp for individuals with disabilities. His arrest sparked national attention, with mixed reactions from the community, some viewing him as a modern-day Thoreau, while others saw him as a criminal. This is the story of Christopher Knight, the North Pond Hermit, and possibly the most famous person in Maine. Live from 800 East Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Jason Hoke, that's Sean Kipe, and this is How It All Went South. In the quiet wooden expanse of Rome, Maine, strange thefts whispered through the community since the late 80s. Flashlights stripped of batteries, steaks vanishing from fridges, frying pans disappearing, and even winter jackets seemed to stroll into the forest on their own. Propane tanks vanished, replaced with emptier ones. It wasn't just the items themselves, but the way they vanished that unnerved the locals. Locks were left intact, windows quietly slid open. Whoever was responsible seemed to move like a ghost. Legend grew and rumors spread throughout the North Pond area of a mysterious thief, a hermit, lurking in the wilderness. The intrusions left the community on edge, uneasy about someone constantly entering their homes and camps. Some residents gave up on reporting the break-ins to police. Others, resigned to the burglar's presence, left notes pleading with him to spare their belongings and asking that he leave a shopping list for requests.
That's cool, because it's clearly somebody stealing that, obviously needs things, and it's not like they're stealing things that are almost necessities or like things that you would need to survive. So that's actually kind of cool. That it's like, look, stop stealing my fucking propane, dude. I go to grill.
Right.
I got the family in town. Well, tell me what you need.
Well, and sometimes he would take a boat, take it, and then he put it right back where it was, like because he needed to I don't know, fish or do whatever, right? And so he's very careful.
Yeah.
But I think, man, I looked at so many interviews with some of the locals, and they're all very sweet. They've got these great accents. I mean, they're the cutest people in the world in this small Maine town, and they're just a little bit nervous about if someone's peering in the back porch door or coming in at night. And he would actually come into their places while they were there.
Well, that I'm not. Yeah, that
so it's
would
like,
not be cool with that.
Not be cool with that. And legend grows. It ends up being 27 years of this behavior. And
that's the stuff that like local legends are made of. Or what do you call them?
Like urban
legends.
Urban legends. Yeah,
that's the stuff that those things are made out of.
Yeah, so this it continues to build in the kind of quietest area in the country almost, right? So among the many places targeted was Pine Tree Camp, Maine's only American Camp Association accredited retreat for individuals with physical and developmental disabilities, established in 1945. During the off seasons when campers and staff were gone, the hermit would raid the property for food, tools, and supplies. Year after year, the burglaries continued, always in the spring and fall. The camp's facilities manager was convinced it was the work of a single person, a phantom thief methodically robbing the camp. Don Williams Robinson, the camp director, said he was using the camp like a local Walmart. So I don't think he was meaning harm because it was a disability friendly camp.
Sounds like it was just there.
But that rubbed people the wrong way because it was that camp, right? So he's doing this now. He's not only coming into our house or our cabin, he's also hitting this camp.
Yeah, that kind of rubs you a different way.
Yeah. And like we said, the legend builds. So Sergeant Terry Hughes of the Maine Warden Service spent close to a couple of decades chasing this enigma. Hughes first learned of the case when he joined the service in 1995 and had been actively involved in tracking this thief since. By the summer of 2012, the mystery deepened when game cameras hidden in smoke detectors captured blurry images of a man carrying a backpack. The photos were circulated to residents in the nearby towns of Mercer, Smithfield, and Rome. He looked gaunt. His clothes were tattered. Locals dubbed him the backpack burglar, but no one could identify him. And I've seen some of these stills that are captured from the smoke detector cameras, and he's going into people's fridges and, like checking out what kind of beer they have, and like he's eating chips out of a bag, right?
And it puts the bag back.
Yeah, and the residents like, it's kind of gross.
Well, yeah.
Like I know that like it's not super harmful, but like you're sticking your paws in my
your
chips.
dirty paws that have been out in the woods unshowered probably for the majority of the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I think there was a sense that if we could just take a look at this guy, we'd know who exactly he was, but no one knew who he was.
See, that's where I'm like, I'm all cool if you want to be a hermit and live in the woods and you know what I mean? It's a little odd to do that forever and not talk to people, but if you're surviving by stealing from everybody in the local area, that's a little different. You're not really isolated, you're just not buying shit.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to tell you exactly what happened in the capture and identification of this man. Right after the break. So we've talked about the hermit on the loose, gaining legend in the town of Rome, Maine, and they don't know who he is, but he can't go on doing this forever, right? So a break finally came in April 2013, and with the help of U.S. Border Patrol, this man, Sergeant Terry Hughes, set up motion sensors and cameras around a freezer in Pine Tree Camp that have been frequently targeted for food.
Just picturing this lone freezer in the middle of a field with a spotlight on it, just propped open with meat and fruit.
Yeah, there's
falling out of it, and a big net above it.
I was gonna say like the freezer doors popped open with a stick,
like a giant rabbit snare.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's brilliant. That's where's the AI image of that?
Well, I think we need some help in the edit on this one. We'll show you what we came up with in the video version of this. How's that? So living down the road, Sergeant Hughes waited for the inevitable. When the alert came through one quiet night, Hughes rushed to the scene. There he apprehended a man who had eluded capture for nearly 3 decades. At the time of his arrest, the man was wearing a winter jacket, wool hat, hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and boots, all allegedly stolen except for his glasses. When Hughes encountered him, his backpack and gym bag were stuffed with items including Hormel bacon, sweet tart candies, containers of Folgers coffee, potato chips, corn syrup, Kraft marshmallows, rolls of electrical tape, a poncho, bottled water, a set of pliers, and a fair amount of cheese. Items total.
Eat my cheese.
Eat my cheese. Items that total. The total value of those items was $425.38, and he also carried a wallet with $395 in cash. So he's literally like picking up all these little items from all these little places. And there's this charming story. This charming woman who tells the story of she's got the camera in her smoke detector, and they got this shot. So she talks about how she prints out that photo, puts it in a frame, and so the next time
he comes by, he sees a picture of him,
but he doesn't do anything. But she's like, that'll get him, that'll keep him away. But like, it didn't work. So she had maybe he didn't know what he looked like. Is that possible? He's never been in front of a mirror in 27 years. As weird as that sounds.
I mean, he's breaking into those windows. He's seeing himself at least a little.
That's true. That's true. So who was this man?
So I was all the things that were in this guy's bag. I'm sure that's not all he was eating, but it's like he's living off of cheese and marshmallows and bacon. Like, how do you even live for 30? Whether you're in the woods alone or not, how do you live off cheese and marshmallows? And sweet tarts. Don't forget.
And actually, the residents had some comments about that. Like, he didn't eat very healthy. He was taking snacks and bacon and things like that.
They said that?
Yeah, they absolutely did. And the man had not only had he not spoken in 26, 27 years, he hadn't visited a doctor, right? He's in the middle of nowhere in freezing temperatures and then eating really unhealthy things. So somehow it worked, right?
Which is crazy, man, because it gets cold in Maine.
And I'll get into that.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah, it's pretty wild of all the places that you would be a hermit. Of course, that is so remote being up in Maine, but it also comes at a price, right? So who is this man? His name was Christopher Knight. Thin, unkempt, and quiet, Knight had lived alone in the dense Maine woods since 1986. 27 years earlier. When asked how long he'd been in hiding, Knight replied using an eerie point of reference. When was the Chernobyl disaster? I mean...
That's odd, but I think if that was the last thing that happened, maybe before he split into the woods.
Yeah, it was a thing that he remembered.
Yeah, because if you're not reading papers and you have no idea what... Maybe, I would think if that was part of his thing, was just separating from all forms of...
Well, so he actually had a huge collection of books. He had over 100 books. He was very up on reading.
So he knew what was happening in the world around him?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually...
So that is weird then. When was Chernobyl?
He actually knew who the Kardashians were because he stole a People magazine.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Seriously.
You've ruined my day. A man that lived in the forest for 27 years knows who the Kardashians are. That makes me so sad.
100%. This is a true story. So he really did read a lot. What else are you going to do in the middle of the woods, right?
I am so disappointed with that. I can tell you that he probably was not reading. That Kardashian article was not... He does not know what Kris Jenner's up to.
Fair point. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, think about it.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I got the hint. So Knight's story unraveled slowly. At just 20 years old, Knight had abandoned his life without a word. When questioned, he told officers he had no address, no car, didn't get the mail, hadn't filed taxes, or collected disability. He claimed that the last time he bought anything was sometime in the 1980s. Think about that.
That's wild.
The last time you bought anything. Like, I know he had cash on him, when they busted him, but I'm not sure what he was using that for, but he said...
It's the old Confederate money. It's
got a buffalo penny here.
Yeah.
But he didn't know that if his parents were alive or dead.
That's so weird.
A records check revealed that his driver's license, albeit expired in 1986, was still valid, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And he wasn't listed as a wanted criminal or a missing person. So he literally fell off the face of the earth.
That reminds me of and maybe you'll get into it with why, maybe he said, I don't know, why he chose to do this, but it reminds me of Into the Wild.
Right.
Where, Emil Hirsch, I forget the guy's name he was playing, but,
yeah,
had money, was from a good background and had sort of the world, I don't want to say handed to him, and just said, this is not what I want. I don't want to be a part of this system of things, and I want to just do what I want to do. And
not everyone adjusts to change, or we're not all extroverts. We're all not all socially, like he's socially awkward. I'll get into that. He's coming up in high school.
Well, of course he's socially awkward because he, lived alone for 30 years and didn't talk to anybody.
But even before that, he was that way.
Yeah. It's becoming an adult, maybe. I can see that. There's a point of when some people maybe become adult where, you realize the world's a different place as you enter adulthood and the responsibilities start getting. Yeah.
And sometimes it just sticks.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, I think I should just be here. And I think that's what happened to him. He's, he probably didn't have a plan to do this for 27 years, but, one winter turns
Right.
into one spring, which turns into one fall, and then it just repeats itself,
Yeah.
and you find yourself in a zone that is safe for you, and then you just do these things, and it doesn't feel dangerous at all either. It just
Yeah.
feels like this is what I want.
I'll tell you, man, when I go backpacking, whatever in the Rockies or wherever, there is no happier place for me when I am and I'm an extrovert. You know me. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk to anybody and whatever, but I mean, there is something about that. It changes your and there have been tons of studies done on this where it changes your within 3 to 4 days measurable levels of stress go down considerably. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits to being alone in the woods, in nature.
Yeah.
So, maybe he just got out there and was like, this feels better.
Yeah,
I'm staying.
I got my corner, right? Like
Yeah.
this is just me. He also told authorities that he took no medications, had never seen a doctor, and said he'd never been sick because of illness because it required human contact.
That's probably true. Yeah. That's crazy to think about that.
So we will talk a little bit about this, but there's a certain, I talked about like there's a certain throw quality to this where it's like, wow, this is amazing that this guy can escape all the pressures of society. And so you see the local community weigh in either one side or the other. He's a criminal. He's stolen things from my house. He's invaded my privacy. We don't like him. He needs to be locked up. And then there's this other kind of fantasy world, right? Of like, man, I know it's been tough on this guy, but like being left alone, like seriously,
You know which side of the fence Jason's on. Or there are these other ridiculous idiots living in a fantasy world.
No, I mean the fantasy of being able to let it all go.
Yeah. maybe it didn't come out that way.
Yeah,
I know what you meant.
So Knight's ability to remain undetected for so long was partly due to luck. His camp, hidden in a remote stretch near Belgrade Lakes, sat on land owned by a woman who rarely used it. So she had no idea that this guy was there. She had acquired the property as part of a divorce settlement and wasn't active on it. She didn't cut timber or visit the site regularly. So it was the perfect cover for Knight, who had carefully chosen his location to avoid contact with others. And this camp is really a camp. It's incredible. We'll share some photos and videos of this, but sheltered by a thick patch of old hemlocks and boulders, his camp was perched on the side of a ridge that sheltered him from the north wind and kept him concealed from hunters and hikers. Because you think someone's going to stumble across this guy, that it was like one of those impossibly lucky areas to have that no one would ever want to go up to. Knight's camp was a marvel of ingenuity and resourcefulness. Covered by several layers of brown tarps, he used a simple camping net for shelter, created makeshift pathways for easier navigation, and a precarious setup for food storage to keep it away from animals. The other question you might have, right? Bears and everything in the woods.
Sure.
So he had a system for this. He had largely survived Maine's harsh winters by layering stolen clothing, foraging, scavenging roadkill, and of course, stealing. And
I mean, I guess when you're hungry, but scavenging roadkill.
Yeah.
That's so gross, man.
And this is crazy. He never started a fire. He never had
How would you cook the food?
So he had one of those 2-burner Coleman things.
Okay, so he was... That's so hard to believe because you have to.
And then he would steal propane tanks and do things like that.
Yeah,
He never started a fire though. All those 27 years,
just to avoid because eventually somebody's going to see the smoke or smell it. Or that's wild, man.
And so he would also use the that Coleman. You know what I'm talking about. The Coleman stove. He would melt snow for drinking water that way too.
Yeah,
and it goes without saying just how cold it is during those winters.
Yeah, man. Have you ever been to Maine? Any part of Maine in the winter?
I've never been to Maine, no.
Yeah, I was in I was in a couple different places, but Portland, Maine,
I'd love to go.
years ago.
Yeah.
I liked it. I mean, it's beautiful. And I know that I didn't get to see the coastline. You ever seen The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin? Remember that movie where at the end the whole big scene? That's Maine. Just the jagged coast. It's such a beautiful place. But like, living there, man. It's Midwest winters. I feel like
Tough.
Tell me if I'm wrong, people from Maine, but it's kind of like Midwest winters, but you have that like air coming off the ocean, right? Which is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was lucky to not have that wind coming at him.
Yeah.
My son, when he graduated high school, my oldest son, he took a trip with 2 other boys, like as a, like I just graduated, I'm going to be starting college. So like we're jumping in a car from Atlanta, and he drove all the way up to Maine.
Yeah.
And of course he told us later, we just decided to go out on a hike one night. It was dark out, but we had lamps and things. I'm like, okay. Well, thanks for telling me after, bears and everything else. So who knows?
Yeah.
Knight admitted he didn't like stealing, but he felt it was necessary. He longed for vegetables, a luxury his forest diet couldn't provide. So I know he ate the junk food and the roadkill and the bacon, but there was something he wanted.
Some damn carrots.
Yeah.
Please.
But who is this man, Christopher Knight? So he was raised in a middle-class family with 4 older brothers and a younger sister. He was a quiet, bright student with good grades who graduated early. His father worked at a creamery before passing away in 2001, and his mother, in her 80s at the time of his 2013 arrest, still lived in the family's 2-story colonial home on a 50-acre property.
Hold up. On a 50-acre, but the guy could have gone out on his family's property and been completely isolated, really.
Oh, and
50 acres is a big swath of land.
And he had a bunch of, like I said, he's got 4 older brothers and a younger sister. He had family that could have supported him.
Well, I don't think he wanted to be supported. It sounds like he just wanted to be alone. Maybe he hates his family.
Knight had shown no signs of trouble growing up, though. The family, deeply private, never filed a missing persons report.
Yeah, that's weird.
Assuming Knight had moved out of state and lost touch.
Nah. That's weird. Right?
Yeah, that is
weird. If the family was private, come on.
Yeah.
Our son is missing. We haven't heard from him in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. No missing. Hey, what happened to him? Is he dead?
I don't know. He just never calls.
Yeah, he just never calls. There's more to that.
Well, he's described by some of his high school classmates, and you see the yearbook photos of him. He's got the awkward glasses, and he was described as awkward, as an outsider. And this is wild. Like people in the community, when they described him when he was caught, because he does look awkward. He looks. This is terrible that they said this. He looks like a child abuser. Like it's just some people.
But how do you not look awful when you've been living in the forest, scavenging for food and supplies for almost 30 years? You're going to look. It changes your entire bone structure, facial structure, the way the fat has gone from parts of your body, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying he doesn't look weird. I'm just saying.
But what a thing to say is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's it. Like, right. Well, come on.
Right.
Come on.
Like, what does a child abuser look like?
Right. Like, he looks like a hermit. Just say that. Or like,
right.
Maybe he looks a little strange, but like someone comes and says,
that was somebody who was for him being arrested. Looks like a child abuser.
Yeah.
Maybe he is.
What's interesting is while he was in the woods and on his own, he actually kept himself clean shaven. So I think our perception
in case he needed the job interview.
Well, but your perception of a hermit, someone like living in a cave with a big beard and like that wasn't him.
What's his name? He lived in the woods. Bear something. He had the big beard and scraggly hair.
Like Grizzly Adams?
Grizzly Adams, that's it.
Yeah.
Grizzly Bear. Bear Adams. Bear Grylls.
Bear Grylls, yeah.
The Grizzly Adams is like what you think of when you think of hermit, like scrawny,
right?
raggedy hair and big old beard, just, long, just cruddy fingernails. And
Well, I think he had the cruddy fingernails,
probably.
but he did.
He's an excellently manicured hermit.
Yeah. Because he got all the.
You just see this hermit out in the woods. He's got his feet propped up on a rock with little things between his toes.
You're terrible.
Nail health is important.
Hey, listen, he didn't go to the doctor for 27 years. You got to give him credit for that too, right?
No, but that's a really good point. And I probably wouldn't have thought about that right out of the gate. I just would have thought at first, like, wow, he's lucky.
Right.
But not being around people, if that's where you get airborne illnesses or touching surface, like you get a cold or the flu or whatever. Now, I mean, there's cancer, there's things like that. But what if he had an abscessed tooth? I always think about that, right? Like
Castaway. Yeah.
Jinx. Well,
and actually,
but seriously, that is my freaking worst fear. Here's two things I always think about. If I get stranded on a desert island, I go, I should really get LASIK because I wear contacts. And if I get stranded on a desert island, eventually I'm going to lose a contact, right? I fear that.
Okay.
It's a weird fear, but I do. And the other is like, what if I have like an abscess or a tooth, something happens there? I think about this stuff sometimes. I don't know why. I don't know. These are my two fears, and something like that happened. I'm saying, what if this guy, because you can't, the whole thing in Castaway,
yeah,
you could do it. And I guess if you got to the point, you would knock the tooth out. But can you imagine how painful that would be? And to do it yourself, like that takes a lot that most people couldn't do.
It takes a lot. Yeah.
Hermit or not.
Yeah. And I love that movie. And it's like the island version of being a hermit. Like
sure.
He's on, and he's got the beard in that case, right? He didn't have the shaving kit on the island.
Mm-mm.
Interesting.
Here, hold on. I'm gonna pose a question to the audience right now. That's honest to God, like not a fear, but it's something I think about. Like if I get stranded on a desert island, like I know my way around like survival stuff. I think I'd do all right. I can make a shelter. I can make a fire. I can catch a fish with a spear. I'd figure all that out pretty easily.
Yep.
Do I pack glasses with me everywhere I go on a trip? Even camping, I pack glasses. I do. I take my glasses with me.
Don't pack a fresh pair of underwear though. Just glasses.
I would rather have my vision than clean underwear if I'm stranded on an island or in the woods. I swear to God,
that makes one of us.
Dude, if you're stranded somewhere and you can't see, you're done.
Okay.
That's my fear. That is my fear. And contacts only last so long. Right?
Okay, Sean. So you're on to something.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying.
You're on to something. So Christopher Knight started to lose his vision.
That's how he got caught.
Where he was and kind of the pathway through the forest and how he went from point A. At the end, it was kind of done by memory.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't see that well and he just knew where to go. Isn't that wild? To your point, he's been doing it for so long. Like
it's not. And I'll tell you why. Have you ever, in your house, right, at night, like if you want to come down and get a snack in the fridge, you can navigate your way through the complete darkness.
Yeah.
Or in the bedroom, you turn a light out and you get into bed. You can navigate because you've done it enough times. Yeah. By muscle memory,
Yep.
all that stuff. So that makes sense. But that's crazy. I really was just going off on my own eccentric, weird stuff in my head. But
disappear into the woods somewhere.
I would love to.
And he had those glasses too. So it's just, even the prescription.
I didn't know that his vision was failing. That's interesting that I hit on that.
And he told there's a book written about it that I'll get into at the end, but just to kind of skip ahead a little bit, those winters were so brutal and you risk hypothermia. And this is so wild. He would, I hope I get this right. He would get up every morning at 2:30 a.m. during the winter and walk around the camp. He created a circle.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart. So that you're getting up, but getting your blood flowing, getting your body temperature.
Yeah, because your heart will freeze. That's
really really, really smart. And we wonder how, because I mean, those winters can be so brutal, and
Yeah.
the elements, I mean, man, look, I've camped in snow and 20-degree weather. You can do it, and it's, but if you have the proper, stuff, tent and a nice sleeping bag, and you're
Yep.
layered up and all
Yep.
this kind of stuff, he's working with limited things, and that's for a night or two or a couple nights. This is almost 30 years of going through those seasonal, that's
So it was very smart on his part to be able to
sure.
do something like that. So
Yeah.
like I don't know, just what we do instinctually to survive. And it may have just been one night where he was just like so cold. He got up and
Yeah.
he's like, I need to do this every night.
Yeah.
So like his sleep pattern changed as a result of trying to survive these winters. Think about 27 winters. 27.
I haven't even been alive for 27 winters.
By the way, those winters in Maine aren't just 3 months.
Yeah, right.
It's a long thaw.
Well, sure, and just because it's not winter, you still deal with. I mean, look, man,
Yeah.
sleeping outside when it's cold is fun for a minute because it's just fun,
Right.
it's different. But after a while, it really, really sucks. It's not fun because it's just not. And he's not. He's going out to get supplies, but I doubt he's like hiking for fun. You live in the woods.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Read? Just try to stay warm.
Yeah, pretty much. He wasn't even talking to himself.
Drinking hot snow water.
Yeah. Whatever works. Well, let's get back to a little bit of his history of kind of what we know about him before all this happened. So after completing a 9-month course at Sylvania Technical School in Massachusetts, he worked installing home and car alarm systems. But in the summer of 1986, less than a year into working his job, he drove his white 1985 Subaru Brat he code-signed with his brother Joel from Massachusetts deep into Maine's Moosehead Lake wilderness, parked it when it ran out of gas, left the keys on the console, and walked into the woods. That was it.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, mental break of some kind, or
Yeah.
it's not normal to do that for sure.
That's why it's so fascinating.
No, it is. It is. But that's a very, and then to stay, like you said, for any real length of time. I mean, it's kind of speaks to maybe something else going on there.
Yeah, and so it's fascinating, like looking at the stories as they were reported before he was caught, and then this becomes more than just a local story when he's brought in. It becomes national. New York Times shows up, the Atlantic shows up. And this is huge. And one of the folks in the town said, he's like, it was front page news for 8 days in a row in the local paper. Like, we don't even get murders that may or may not happen here 8 days in a row. Like, this was the news. This is what everyone wanted to find out about. So it absolutely in 2013 captured that national attention. The man who had survived nearly 3 decades in isolation had become an enigma, both admired and criticized. His campsite, dismantled piece by piece a few days after his arrest, revealed a surreal collection of stolen goods. Flashlights, propane tanks, frying pans, books, and winter clothing. Among them were an old TV, which no longer worked. Obviously, the extension cord is not going to reach anything. A radio, the reception enhanced by an antenna Knight had secured to a tree about 25 to 30 feet off the ground. So he went up there and probably like screwed it into a tree and had a radio. At least he could have some connection, right? Initially, the landowner had given consent to allow media and others to access the property. After the group was already in the woods, she revoked that consent, requesting privacy and barring the press and onlookers from the site. So it turned into a circus, basically.
Sure, yeah. And when people like that show up in droves, they're leaving trash and, they're driving through your whatever. Yeah.
And it was very difficult. Like, the people, they knew where the camp was, and it was very, very difficult to get to. So, I mean, there was this like...
You have to risk people getting lost. And
yes,
and
exactly.
Like too. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Law enforcement transferred and cataloged the camp's contents at Pine Tree Camp. where local residents gathered in early May 2013 to reclaim their stolen items. And I saw some instances where these people show up and they're like, that's my cooler. I wondered what happened to my cooler. That's my cooler.
15 years ago.
Yeah, that was.
I lost my cooler and I want it back.
Like I said, the community had mixed feelings after Knight had been taken into custody. To some, he was this modern day hero who rejected society and thrived against impossible odds. To others, he was a thief who violated their sense of security. So I'm curious, hearing a little bit about him and the buildup of this legend, not only the mystery of what happened when he was gone, but also we know who he is. He's caught. He stole from us. Like, where do you lean in on this?
Look, the guy was committing crimes. I think if there are people who want to press charges, you have to do something. He did break the law.
It was like 1,000 crimes is what they said.
Well, I'm sure. You know what I'm saying? So, but what do you...
Probably more if you think about it.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
You can do like 40 a year.
But it sounds like it was also... I say it's all small things, but it probably added up to a considerable amount of money. Here's a fine. Yeah. Here's a little bit of, whether it's a couple months in jail and probation.
Yeah.
After that for a few years. That's what I would say, man. It's like the guy wasn't hurting anybody per se, but he was stealing. So you gotta give him something, but
yeah.
It's not like he was running around vandalizing and stealing cars and robbing people at the ATM. So
I think it's fair. I think that's why this is so interesting. Yeah. Is you find yourself on both sides of the story depending on how you sympathize with the various people that were there, or just why this is so incredible to be by yourself. I get it.
We know which side of the fence you're on.
If you don't hear from me in a couple weeks, you know where I went. I went to
Jason. I would give you 6 hours alone in the woods by yourself trying to survive.
Listen, I barely made it 6 hours when we were in Prague over Christmas in 22-degree weather.
Jason would leave the second that he couldn't get cell service.
This is
like, I gotta check these emails.
Yeah. Well, between us, we don't have any body fat on us to keep us warm, too, right?
Seriously. I can't starve for very long.
Yeah, exactly. So, Knight's case progressed in court, beginning with a Somerset County grand jury indictment, one count of each burglary and theft in August 2013. But the case was then transferred to another county where a grand jury indicted him on 6 burglary charges and 5 theft charges, 4 Class B burglary charges from camps and homes in Rome, and a variety of other charges. So, determined that he would be evaluated for eligibility in Maine pretrial services, a program that enables people to be out on bail even if they can't afford to post bail, of course, because he didn't have any money. Legal proceedings continued. Later that month, he pled not guilty. Now, District Attorney Megan Maloney, only months in her role, faced a difficult decision. Most of Knight's crimes were beyond the statute of limitations, of course.
There's that too.
And she questioned whether harsh punishment was the right course of action. I became convinced I could rehabilitate Christopher Knight, she said. So there was like, do we really want to throw the book at him?
Yeah,
So ultimately, he pled guilty to 6 out of the 13 counts of burglary and theft in October 2013. And instead of pursuing a lengthy prison sentence, he was sentenced to 7 months in jail and ordered to complete a year-long rehab program after being accepted into the Co-Occurring Disorders Court, a special program for individuals with mental health and substance abuse problems. Now, I mentioned that we were going to talk about alcohol here. The theft of specific types of beer, bypassing brands like Bud and Miller Lite in favor of Budweiser, led the court to believe that Knight struggled with alcoholism.
What else is he going to do out there by himself for 30 years?
Right. The conditions included weekly Monday meetings with the judge, avoiding alcohol, and finding a job or attending school. If he violated the agreement, he faced up to 7 years in prison. So, Knight's arrest, the camp being dismantled, and court proceedings were widely publicized. A local deli capitalized on the story's popularity and created the Hermit sandwich. advertised as made from all locally stolen ingredients.
That's funny.
Featuring barbecue, roast beef, pastrami, pepperoni, American cheese, and onion rings. The menu item could be ordered for a whole for $8.40 or $5.90 for a half portion.
It's a bacon, cheese, and sweet tart sandwich.
And there's actually
fried on marshmallow. Yeah.
And there's actually a song about him too, about the North Pond Hermit. Just a couple guys on guitar. That's pretty good too. Like the legend of this guy becomes a song, because of course it does, right?
Yeah.
After living with his mother for a while, it was reported in 2019 that Knight has his own place in a small Maine town and works in an auto shop. Although he doesn't want to talk to anyone, he did consult on The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit, written by journalist Michael Finkel, about him and his experience living alone in the woods. And this is really cool. And I actually got a little bit jealous of this, because this guy did what storytellers, how we approach people, of like, no one's ever done this story. If I could get this person to tell me that story, it would be incredible. We go through this all the time. We talk about this a lot. And so Finkel wrote him a letter in prison, a handwritten letter, and he wrote back. And they started to have a correspondence. And Finkel loves books, and he loves camping, and expressed that in this letter, or a series of letters. And he found out that Knight had hundreds of books stored at the camp. And obviously he loved camping, because that's what he did for 27 years. And Finkel even admitted to Knight that he had been fired by the New York Times when he created a story of a character or a person that was a composite of a variety of people. And that's a no-no for New York Times reporting, right? And so he admitted that he was vulnerable, that he had done something wrong. He admitted that to Knight. And so they formed a connection, if you will, in these letters. And he sent about 9 letters, and then Knight went silent. I think maybe he just got a little bit uncomfortable. He backed off again, right? Still in jail. And so Finkel decided to just show up at the jail. And he describes, and I appreciate this, they're looking through the plexiglass with the phone cords in the wall. They've never met each other. This man has barely spoken any words in years. And for Finkel, this is completely awkward, as you can imagine. And he does something that is against his instincts, which is he says nothing. And Knight, now with a full beard and everything, says nothing. And he said it felt like a lifetime, but it was about 3 minutes of silence. And something in that 3 minutes of silence, he could tell that Knight's body started to relax. Like he was allowed the time to then be able to let that fear melt away, and they had a conversation. Like, awkward silences are terrible, but like with someone that hadn't spoken in so long, I mean, this was huge. So he wrote a really incredible book about that, and there's also been a documentary about Knight. And that's the story of the North Pond Hermit. Like, just truly a legendary story that became national news, and the legend still lives on today. So that's all we have this week. The incredible story of the North Pond Hermit. Join us again for another episode soon. I'm Jason Hoke. That's Sean Kipe. This has been How It All Went South.